The thing that I've really been fascinated with is to be able to see how what we did as rugby players, how you can apply that in the business world as well. I think the skills that you learn through sport and the learnings through sport is applicable in everyday life. You know, you can apply that to be good at what you do. You know, in my case, in the business world now, you know, and it helps you to hopefully grow in that area as well. You know, so whether that is just discipline, whether it's taking accountability for your actions, whether it is just putting in hard work, being able to stand out as a leader and be someone that others can look up to, you know, all those elements that you try and implement in the business world.
For me, there was always two things around having an impact. Whether you started or whether you came on the bench, you know, the first thing I really wanted to do personally was get my hands on the ball and carry as best as possible. And the second thing was doing something individually that lifted the people around me, because rugby just is this amazing ability to be able to lift each other up by some strong action. In rugby, impact is so short and sharp, and it's adjudicated on a weekly basis, and you know after 80 minutes the result. In business, I found that the impact is to be strategized over a far longer period, and you've got to be able to assess yourself more than anyone else does, because in business it's really you that looks in the mirror after a month or a year or a 3-year strategy to decide how your business is going, how the numbers are going. So impact in business, I think, requires a lot more patience and a lot more self-reflection in terms of where you're going and how fast you are getting to your goal.
That's the one challenge that a captain has, is to be able to try and inspire and motivate your players to get the best out of them. The way that I tried to do that was to really invest in the human capital, you know, so spend time with your teammates, get to know them, get to know what motivates them, what drives them, and why they actually do what they do. You know, the meaning of playing a rugby game changes then, because you know what others are playing for as well, along with what you're trying to achieve. So I suppose it's that the whole understanding your why and your purpose, and once you can establish that and also know what others are about, suddenly you know, the challenge is far bigger, and I think the motivation is far higher.
In 2004, when we got called in as a squad under Jake for the first time, there was still a huge amount of provincialism, which, to be explained in a small way, is, you know, we'd have all the guys from Western Province in one table, all the guys from the Sharks in one table, all the guys from the Bulls in the one table, and there was this provincialism around, almost like a club system, where, you know, there wasn't quite an SA team yet, there wasn't quite an integrated team, and so the barriers that we broke, and the only way we broke them was by giving the senior players a bit of responsibility to intermix, change exactly where they sat for meals and who they spoke to, and actually create a culture that was only green and gold and not the colour of our clubs.
Trust, culture, accountability. I think if you have that, and you know, you kind of name them and it sounds easy. None of those are easy, and those are things that gets created over time. Trust gets earned and built over time. A good culture, it takes time to create that. You know, it's certainly not something that's easy, but I believe that if you do have those kind of ingredients in a team environment, then hopefully you can be successful over a long period of time.
Yeah, leadership's always an interesting thing. I think there are different types of leaders. There are autocratic leaders, there are leaders that lead by example, there are quiet leaders. I would say my approach was more around building relationships with players that was built on trust and, I guess, consistency. I always loved following leaders that were consistent both on the field and off the field in how they behaved in all facets, in front of the camera, behind the camera, at home. And for me, that made a big impact. So I'd like to believe that the players gained a respect for me by seeing consistent behaviour across the board.
I built trust, I think, through spending time with individual players within my team, getting to know them, getting to know what drives them and what motivates them. You know, so it's not just in the team context, but very much in the one-on-one basis as well. And then I think the most important thing of trust is not just to be able to talk about it, but being able to walk the walk, doing what you say you would do, and then sticking to that. You know, if you do that and you do it not just once or twice, but on a consistent basis, then trust is earned.
The biggest lesson I ever got was from a coach, Peter de Villiers, and it was late in my career. I was captaining the 2009 side, and we lost a game that we shouldn't have lost. And I was sitting sulking like a little kid, and he put his arm around me and said, "What's the problem?" And I thought it was a pretty silly question, and I said, "Well, we've lost. We shouldn't have lost, and this is a game that we threw away." And he put his arm on my shoulder and he said, "Well, it's only losing if you're not learning." And I think that's really the lesson that I've taken through into business, is that it took me a better part of 8 years to become an experienced rugby player. Man, I'm only into my 8th year as a businessman, and I think the time frame of becoming an experienced businessman means that you're going to have to learn from all the small mistakes that you make along the way.
I think the fear of failure is something that motivates you as well, but the big thing is, how do you control it? And I think you control it by not thinking about the end goal, but rather thinking of the processes that you need to follow to eventually get there. If the focus point is too far in the distance, that's when the worry comes in and you can't do anything about it. What you do have control over is what you do next and what your next job is. And if you do that right and follow those processes, then hopefully you do get to that eventual end goal.
I see my ability to handle high pressure situations at the end of my career being purely because of all of the dark places that we went to as a team together. And as a captain of that team, we won Tri-Nations, and then 2 years later we lost 6 games in a row. I learned a lot more about handling pressure by losing 6 games in a row as I did by winning a Tri-Nations in 2004, and that would have been a far more valuable lesson for me to go into a World Cup in France in 2007 and lead a team with composure and calmness.
When you're playing a big game, that's where you want to challenge yourself, that's where you want to test yourself, and that's actually where you want to be at your very best. In a way, you do dread it, or you're extremely nervous for it. Maybe not dread, you're nervous for those occasions, but it's actually what you want as well, because the rush of being able to get it right, it's like, now in business, getting a meeting that you're not supposed to have, with a big company or a very influential person. And how do you prepare yourself for it? Well, you do exactly that. You prepare. You make sure that you know exactly what you want to achieve from the meeting, from the game, how you're going to execute that, and what you needed to do in the moment. If your preparation is good, then usually you go into those meetings, into those games with so much more confidence. You're still nervous, but it's like preparing for a big test as well, at school. If you don't learn, you'll be pretty nervous because it's not going to go well. But if you put in the time, the chance of being successful is so much more.